Welcome to What's What with Heather Harris, the podcast for the fiercely hopeful. Here, we explore the lesser-known innovations, overlooked ideas, and hidden forces quietly shaping our human experience. I'm your host, Heather Harris. Let's find out what's what. There are some childhoods that unfold not only within a family, but within history itself. Rachel Manley grew up in Jamaica during a period of extraordinary transformation, a country moving out from under British colonial rule and toward independence, identity, and reinvention. It was a time filled with optimism, cultural awakening, political intensity, and deep social change. And at the center of Rachel's world was Drumblair, both a family home and in many ways a front row seat to history. Her grandfather, Norman Manley, helped shape modern Jamaica itself, while her family occupied a unique place within the country's political and intellectual life. But a memoir rarely lives in the headlines. Beyond the public story of nation building are the quieter truths of childhood: memory, longing, family mythology, belonging, and the complicated emotional landscapes we spend our lives trying to understand. Rachel Manley is an acclaimed author, poet, and Governor General's Award winner whose work explores those spaces with remarkable honesty and lyricism. In this conversation, we talk about not only her life and upbringing, but what it means to write a memoir itself, to revisit memory through language, and to transform private experience into literature while wrestling with the tension between truth, storytelling, and inheritance. This is a conversation about history and intimacy, about family and identity, about the stories we inherit and the ones we eventually choose to tell. Let's begin. Rachel, I am so honored to have you today on my podcast. Thank you very, very much for being here.
It's wonderful to be here. I enjoyed meeting and talking to you, so I think I'll enjoy this.
I think we will enjoy this. So let's start at the very beginning. When did you first realize that you were a writer and a poet?
My grandmother used to say I was a poet, and I had a poem published when I was 9, so that was big excitement in the family. But I don't really think of myself as a writer, though I do have to write it on my occupation line. But I think of myself more as a witness. I guess it's because we live in a world where, writers now I teach a creative writing class at Lesley University, and it's an MFA course. I often think to myself, how did I get here? Because when I was growing up, there were no writing classes. There was, I think in one school we had a 40-minute class called creative writing, but I never went to learn anything. Lawyers are lawyers because they've passed a degree and they have a profession. So in my mind, I never sort of had a moment when I thought I'm a writer. But my grandmother convinced me, since I could not draw or paint and she was an artist, that she had to give me some. In my family, there's so many high-power, bright people that you have to have a little role of your own. So the little granddaughter got the role of poet. And I tried to live up to that and wrote 3 complete failures of poetry books. Then I kind of fled to prose. So
I wouldn't call them complete failures, but okay. So you left the poetry behind and you shifted to prose. And as I said just before we started this interview, you are one of the most magical writers I have ever read in terms of creating beautiful scenes, but also the turns of phrase. They literally will stop you in your tracks. One of the books that I read that you've written is Drumblair. And this is a memoir that braids your personal memories with a very poignant national history of Jamaica. What do you think a memoir can express that a historical piece cannot?
Well, the obvious that if it's a memoir, you had to be there somewhere. You can't write a memoir if you weren't there. And if you were there, it's going to have a more personal, intimate feel to it. I wouldn't say that it is better, it's just different. I don't think you are spared the research because you were there. You can't limit yourself and say, well, it's only what I remember, because the reader is not going to get the context or anything. So you end up doing a lot of historical research, but I guess you're allowed to slide in the anecdotes and the insights that a historian wouldn't necessarily have. And those I have in abundance, having lived with this family.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about the setting in Drumblair. How did you come to be living in that house?
Well, at 2, I was born in England. My father was at LSE studying, and he married my mother, a French English woman. She lived in England. And they were breaking up, and my father made an elaborate plan to give my mother a break and send me to Jamaica. So I went accompanied by stewardesses, and the plane broke down in Reykjavik, I think. And so I was stranded there for 2 nights with them. I have no memory of this. I just had this teddy bear with me, Brumus, who was the big polar bear in the London Zoo. Obviously, my parents must have been happy at some stage because they took their baby girl to the zoo and bought me this bear, Brumus, and a little green bear called Fifi. And so off I set over the Atlantic and got stranded there. When I arrived in Jamaica, my grandfather, who was then chief minister, I think, they met me plainside. And the story is that she said, "I'm your grandmother." And I said, "You are not my grandmother." And I hit her on the head with Brumus. And they were completely astonished that I had an English accent.
Oh, you're kidding.
Jamaican grandchild. How they thought was going to have a Jamaican accent. Anyway, I guess everything was very strange to me. But my earliest memories, strange enough, are all of my grandfather. And I always thought of his lap as my refuge. And they told me that when we were driving home from the airport, they stopped at there's this kind of grid of little cement posts outside the harbour in Kingston when you go along that peninsula to go into Kingston. And apparently I was screaming so loud, they stopped the car. My grandmother showed me a goat on the road. They stopped the car, and I scrambled out of her lap into my grandfather's lap, held onto the wheel and watched the goat. So I think that lap kind of became my safe place. And then I don't remember arriving at Drumblair, but my earliest memories are just this wonderful house, which in my heart is just always my home. My children complain. They say, "You live in the past, you live in Drumblair," but it's a good place to live.
It did sound like a wonderful place to live, populated with so many personalities. Really, I mean, you brought them to life so well in this book. Your family, your grandfather, was so central to Jamaica's political and cultural story. So how do you write about these intimate family details while honoring the weight of that public legacy?
I've thought about this question a lot because it comes up a lot in students that I teach. And I realize something which may be very unusual in my family. Most people have professions. They leave at the office, they come home, it's their family life. Most people, the husband and the wife, do something different. When I look back, it was an astonishing situation where everybody was fighting for independence, for nationhood, for self-government. But my grandfather saw it all politically. Started the first Democratic Party, and it became a model for the Caribbean. My grandmother was horrified to find they would invite her to come and judge exhibitions because she was a sculptress and an artist, trained artist, and she couldn't believe that these school children would have these pictures of children with blonde hair. They would have the animals would be a lion, the flower would be a daffodil, none of which existed in Jamaica. And there was this rich and verdant land of flora and fauna and these gorgeous bodies and people, and that was so different to the English. She was born in Cornwall and grew up English, but actually her mother was my grandfather's mother's sister. They were first cousins, which they've often cited in the political world for reasons why we're all utterly insane. They may be right. So she felt, and the writing, other than the newspapers, the writing was all talking about, winter and spring coming and all these images that were. So she started a huge, I don't know if you can say somebody start something, but I think she was in large part an inspiration for gathering artists and writers. And she started a magazine called Focus, which soon each island had, they had Kaikovoral, they had Bim in Barbados. It became a thing, and that everybody was trying to write nationally, write about things that we saw and felt at home. It's a huge movement. So the thing is that living in that house, there was no difference really between their work, their politics, her cultural movement. We would have on one veranda the artists getting drunk and quarreling and screaming, and then you'd have on the other the more dignified politicians. And at the time, just to show you that, perspective is very important in writing, but particularly memoir. And my perspective really was going from one room to the other. This child, fascinated by all of this, stopping in the middle to take the mail, which was always on this side table, and correct it. I used to correct the addresses. Them out of 10, I don't know why. And then I would go to my grandfather's, and he would have his meetings in the dining room, this huge mahogany table that's still there, still in existence. And there would be all the premiers or the chief ministers of all the islands, because they were trying to form this federation.
Right.
So all the different islands, and I had all their signatures in my autograph book. And I'd be under the table listening, and one day I tied the shoelaces together of Eric Williams and Grantley Adams. Grantley would become the head of the federation. Eric Williams was the famous Trinidadian nationalist, and they hated each other. So when they went to get up, they couldn't get their feet apart, and my grandfather just thought this was the most wonderful metaphor for everything, So that's how my life proceeded. It was kind of explained metaphorically. So it wasn't as though I was consciously combining or consciously trying to accommodate their life's work, the island's development, my grandmother's artistic life, and personal life. It was all one big bundle. I mean, I think in my head, I used to seriously think that my grandfathers went somewhere off, because the housekeeper was always telling me he's building a country. I'd say, where are they? Well, they're building a country. I sort of thought of my grandfather banging nails in the top of Jamaica somewhere, somehow. And I've always found it so improbable, because I've met my mother. I remember when I found out that they really did steal me from my mother. So I didn't meet her till I was 18. I said to her, well, why did you give me up? I always thought, well, she just didn't like children. I didn't take it very personally, because nobody egged me on to be sorry for myself over it. But I guess it must have been a bit of a shock, because I lost both of them. My father didn't come till I was 5. And she said to me, they stole you from me. And when my father died, I got the personal family letters. And indeed, they did. There was a correspondence between my grandmother and my father, and they were involving my poor grandfather, who was a very noble man, to convince her she couldn't afford me. So when I found these letters, I said to my husband, this is awful. I always thought, Mummy, just about. He says, phone her, she's still alive. I called her, it was three in England. And when I was sobbing and telling her, she said, but why are you crying? She said, who would you have been if you'd stayed in England with me? You've had the most wonderful life. You have, at that stage, I had about 7 published books. She said, you would never have had that. They believed in you. They were amazing people. She said, don't waste your time over that. That's silly. And what an act of generosity that she didn't need me to carry a grudge over that I could just love them as I always had. So she became one of my heroines too.
I love that. Generosity and absolutely unconditional love.
Yes.
That she could see the beauty and the outcome of your living
and her
in
pain
Jamaica.
was not of consequence.
Yeah.
In how she saw it, which is so generous.
And a true mother's love.
Yes.
True mother's love. But I can't imagine that shock of you learning that. Yes. When you've believed a narrative your whole life.
And I think you can't be a writer. Maybe you can't be an artist without melodrama in your soul. But I did actually pass out. I fainted when I was reading the letters. When I took them to show my husband, I fainted.
Yeah.
And I'm not a person who faints. I didn't faint when I was pregnant. I fainted, and I think my whole life was built on one premise. And in that second, it just changed.
It all changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how you say you didn't really have to worry about the separation of memory from the actual political context. It was all just integrated in this wonderful childhood that you enjoyed. And I love that you bring in the autograph book. I had an autograph book, but I certainly didn't have any chief ministers signing mine.
When you're a child, it's just those adults in there. You're so proud to have them.
Yeah, they're just people. Do you still have that autograph book?
It's somewhere in all my marriages. It's in one of the storage places. When I'm dead, somebody will find it. It's pink if you're looking for it, guys.
Okay. Everybody note, it's pink. So in Drumblair, as I kind of alluded to, the place seemed to have its own life. It had living character. What is it about home that keeps calling you back to the page?
I can remember every single thing, even where the marbles would run to in a room. So you knew how the wood, because it was a wooden house. I think when you're a child and you probably have had it must have been, though I don't remember it, a huge confusion losing a country and grandparents who knew the animals they had, and it suddenly being replaced by everything new. And somewhere in that house was my rescue and my grandfather. Somewhere there was love and safety. And I'm not a very secure person, really, though I've rationalized a lot of things as I've got older. But I think I associate it, even though it's gone. I mean, watching it being torn down, the only person it was harder for was probably my grandfather. It was awful. But that's just an image in my head of boards and bulldozers. But Drumblair is not in that image. That's just a knowledge. In me, it's still there. And I think it's possibly because all the things my grandfather wanted. Federation came and it failed. We got independence, even though we lost the election. We were independent. We're the most vibrant, wonderful, crazy country. And so I think in a way all that to me is Drumblair was a dream of something. And I remain in the dream, have solace from the dream.
It's a beautiful place to dwell.
Yes.
In reading Drumblair, you become absorbed in that place.
It's interesting. A lot of people don't, and sometimes I don't, and I should read the introduction. The original books don't have any introductions, but the key porter reprints, Austin Clarke, did a very interesting introduction that in a way in a less melodramatic, more historic and factual way, really put the importance of Drumblair to the Caribbean on the map. And I remember when I read it, I wished it had been there in the original version, because it's such a wonderful companion piece, because that is the history you talk about. Can memoir enhance history? In this case, that enhances memoir, because the history is so accurately and beautifully written by him. It's a wonderful introduction.
I'll see if I can find it and link it in the show notes, because I don't think I've read that introduction. And it truly is a memoir that is set in a very pivotal time in not just Jamaica's history, but all of the Caribbean. There was so much that was happening, and a lot of collaboration, a lot of contest, and your grandfather figured very, very largely in all of that.
The whole colonial world was all the colonies were. I think after the Second World War, the black soldiers were treated so badly. I've always felt that was a key, because definitely my uncle who died in the war had an effect on my grandfather, how upset he was at how everyone was treated. So it is a pivotal time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a much larger context to even what was happening in the Caribbean at the time. Were there any memories that you thought were too personal, too raw to include? Did you have to winnow through your recollections?
The one that stands out, I've got into a lot of trouble for putting in. I had a strange, which has never reoccurred in my life, crazy incident at the beginning of the book, where I remember taking the cat and swinging it by the tail. And I remember feeling I had to put it in, because I think you need to know who is telling you a story and what they're capable of, or who they are. And I thought, what's the worst thing I've ever done? If I put that in, I'm kind of giving you my low water mark. I'm not a person in anywhere at all. And I remember the prevention of cruelty to animals. People very, very upset with me about the story. I love animals. I'm sitting here looking at my squirrels waiting to be fed. They're very impatient. And, but to be honest with you, this is not something, as I say, I learned. I figured out in my head this way to cope with it. I always think of the hand of God, that everything in a book you have to love equally, because God loves us equally. I mean, I'm not a deeply religious person, church-wise, but that's the teaching. So if you're the kind of God of your book, and all the characters in there, you have to have equal love for the good and the bad. Because in a funny way, sometimes your villains are more powerful and more useful than your heroes, who sometimes can be a bit bland. So, I'll give you an example. When my mother and father were each married 5 times, so naturally there have been times with step-parents where it has not been easy. So if I had an uneasy thing to write, I would make certain that I had fairly weighed and presented that person with their good and their bad in the same way I did the characters that I'm sympathetic to. And I think when you do that, and then you just give an incident, you give them context, and it also makes you write more objectively, because you're putting it down there. You're saying there's a difference between the hand of God, there's a difference between me at 78 and me at 7. And when you get that distance, what you think would be raw if you just said it unkindly goes into a context where usually you can make it useful rather than cruel.
Yeah, and possibly more authentic. Yes. As well, because we can easily shine a softer light on ourselves and our own behaviors, because they are our own to describe. But if you are more objective, then you create the full character.
I think I was harder on myself than my characters most of the time. But, you know, there's another aspect to this. When you have lived, not suddenly been in public life, but literally from I arrived in Jamaica, I was in public life. I was taken around to meet public meetings. Our family were never out of the public's eye, though it isn't what celebrity is today at all. That was much more modest. People were hardworking. People were public servants in a very serious way. They were not there as adornments to a country or a culture. So I never had that intense embarrassment at being uncovered. I am a very open person because there was no cupboard to hiding in our youth from who we were. It was all, and my whole family, when I wrote my books, I'm always amazed at my students telling me how uncomfortable and worried their families become. My family have never shown even the least bit of interest during the writing of it. And I have spoken bluntly about them with the same love because I adore them, I adore my siblings. And there's never been a problem. And I think it's because we've always had to have wide open, gaping lives because, that's how it
You were under the spotlight. You were in the spotlight.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a question I was going to ask you because I think it is very common for people when they are publishing memoirs, the fear of judgment from the people close to them. That's good to hear that you didn't experience that with your family.
Not at all. Even my father, who, he didn't read his book, but he was in Drumblair. I kind of painted him as a bit of a kind of not their father most of the time, who I adored. I didn't bother him at all. I think he thought it was fair comment, and if it wasn't, he would consider it was my opinion. But my family were like that. They were very democratic to the core. Everybody was entitled to their own opinion.
That's a wonderful family culture, and I think a lot of people listening would envy that.
Yeah.
So you have written across many genres. We spoke about your poetry, memoir, fiction. Would you say that your voice has remained consistent from genre to genre, or did it have to change?
The poetry to prose was easy because really, I think I was really writing prose as poetry. Because sometimes when I hear these classes that go on at my university, I don't know what they're talking about. I've never even heard these phrases. So that was easy, and I think my voice is just the same because it's just that it's got more room with paragraphs. I like it. There's more room to be long-winded. But what I found very difficult was the transition to fiction, which I wasn't really voluntary. The publisher I had, when I say he didn't force me, but he wanted to publish the 2 stories I had as fiction, and they were true stories. And I find it very difficult to write a true story as fiction, and I felt my voice getting caught in my throat all the time. I was uncomfortable, and I'm not happy with either. But some people, one of them, Black Peacock, did very well and people liked. But when I think who I was writing about, who was a writer, it doesn't sit right with me. It should have been a memoir, but it is what it is.
When you wrote Black Peacock, were you writing for a different audience in your mind?
I don't write for an audience.
Yeah.
I write for me, I guess. I don't know why. I never particularly care whether I'm published or not, which upsets my family. Well, my husband, he's like, don't you want to be a bestseller? And I don't write for that. I guess I write because I must, because I have these stories. And then, it's funny, there's another genre I've now entered into that I've never done before, short stories. I have a collection of short stories that's kind of got interrupted by life, but it's about 2/3 the way through. And that is a different voice. I find, because the story is limited, it has a beginning, a middle, and end. It's a story that I would tell at a dinner table or sit at a bar and tell a stranger. It's confined and it's plot. And I'm not used to plot. If you look at my books, life gives you plots, but it's kind of I drift in and out of the plot because that's how my head is. So this is tying me down to stories, and I don't know. I'll see how people react to it. I find I don't have room to ruminate. And my grandmother used to tell me there are two cows. There's Mrs. Brown Cow and Mrs. White Cow. And Mrs. Brown Cow goes down to the river, drinks her water, and comes back to the pasture. Mrs. White Cow meanders around because she wants to look at everything. Well, I guess I'm Mrs. White Cow. So this new format is making me Mrs. Brown Cow, and I'm not certain I'm good at being Mrs. Brown Cow, but they're terrific. When I say they're terrific stories, they are terrific because of the people I've been exposed to in my life, because of my terrific family.
Mm-hmm.
They're terrific stories, but don't get me wrong, I'm not saying my stories are terrific. Their stories are terrific.
Well, and you may feel confined within that format, within that genre of short story, but I can imagine that they're going to be fairly fantastic to read.
They're unusual. Yeah.
Are they? And I'm sure you have some room to meander in there a bit, I hope.
I don't know why. It's not that I don't have room to meander. My head, I have to screw on my head every morning because really I'm headless. I rise to the occasion, to the demand of the day. And to do this, I have to keep to the plot. And I find when I'm keeping to the plot, I feel like my hands are tied or my mind is tied somewhere and it doesn't go. I don't know if at the end of it, if I have a good editor who sees a way for me to expand it, maybe they'll tell me, bring this alive here, do that. I listen. I'm very good at listening to editors because I'm blessed or cursed with a modesty over my writing. I don't think I'm a great writer. I do think I have a lot to learn. I learn so much from my students. I learn so much from teaching my students because I have to work out how they can solve their problems. And then I go, oh my goodness, I should have done that in so-and-so,
Well, that's the beauty, too, of still engaging with people who are new to their craft and have that youthful attitude and exuberance because it rubs off.
They're not youthful. I teach memoir. These are all people.
Oh, they're all okay.
Younger, yeah, because when you're young, you don't write memoir because they don't really have. What do you have to say? But they more go for stage and screen and fiction and poetry, where they should be. Where they
should be. Yeah, I'm always confused when I see a memoir of somebody who's 32.
I know. You have to really have had some big story to make it work.
Yeah, exactly. And we usually do all have some big story, but maybe not enough to fill up a memoir just after 3 decades. Anyway, I'm always a little suspicious of that. So we've talked about your father and we've talked about your grandfather. Both featured very differently in terms of time and attention and proximity. In writing about both of these gentlemen in your life, did anything about those relationships become more apparent to you or more solid as you wrote about them?
Where my grandfather is concerned, not really. I spent the whole of Drumblair guarding him from my grandmother stealing the limelight. She walked in a room and my father got that charisma from her. So in a way, I more discovered my grandmother in keeping her apart. She more came to life, and then in the third of the trilogy, Horses in My Hair, what I found there and hid, I brought out in thing. But no, my grandfather was always very, and I say narrowly in a good way. I understood him, I knew him, and if I have any good in life in me, every single good thing I have, every sense of duty and decency, I have and hard work I have from my grandfather. My father was more of a surprise. I did not realize, I nursed him for the 6 months that the book takes place, nursing him, but it's all flashbacks about him. And I realized how I had limited my vision of him to the personal, to my own anguish with him, which was mostly to do with remarriages and these things are like. And when you're old, you see how silly they are, but when you're young, it's everything. I did not know how much my father loved me till I wrote that book. I remember, when he was dying, he was saying something to me, and I looked up in frustration. He was very hoarse. And I said to my sister, I can't hear him. And she looked at me and she said, Ray, he's telling you that he loves you. And I thought it was, again, a metaphor. It was so typical that I wasn't hearing him because he didn't have a lot of time to spend with us. He wasn't a great traditional father. But oh my God, the 6 of us just love him to death. I mean, all of us are, they tell us we're obsessed with him, but in a good way. So that book helped me very much. But of course, I wrote that book after he had died, so I didn't have a chance to tell him. But I have it in me, But my grandmother I would say also was a surprise in writing, and yet probably I am the most like her.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because you're both artists in your own ways, or?
I don't think I'm an artist. She was an artist. I'm a much more rooted to earth person than her. A lot of my little airy-fairy things are affectations that growing up, near to her, they just stuck in me, but they're not really me, they're hers. But I think the way I look at life, the sense of mystery and wonder, the kind of undogmatic spirituality that she had, a sense of the importance of superstition and think what she used to call things that go bump in the night. I'm very things that go bump in the night. But that maybe just, I don't know if do I dare say it's feminine, because you don't know now if that is if that's profiling. I don't know what it is, but I feel I am more like her, that I respond to life more like her. But I'm not an artist in the sense she was, because she was trained and she was a wonderful art teacher. And I mean, she's one of our greatest artists.
I look forward to hopefully one day seeing her art in person. But it sounds like you both are just connected to, as you say, like the mystery and the wonder and the unknown and the possibility of life.
I remember, this is her. My father is going through all this socialism, and the whole country is in uproar. The middle classes are leaving and think my father is a communist. The workers love him to death, but they can't find bread on their shelves. Everything is going to hell. And my grandmother, she says, oh my God, life has become very difficult. And she says, well, I suppose it's really very straightforward. One must be left because the heart is on the left. I thought, God bless you, Marty. She simplified everything to these peculiar equations in our head where she put things where they should be. If they were in that order, life was possible. And that was what went through life. I love it.
I love that. It's so simple.
A man came in to rob her with a knife, and she was having lunch with an anthropologist called Edith Clark, a quite famous anthropologist of the day. And the man comes in and he's waving his knife, your money or your life. And my grandmother looks at him in the middle of lunch, and she says, excuse me, dear, do you realize I'm having lunch with Miss Edith Clark, the famous anthropologist? Would you have a seat on the veranda and wait? Now, when I tell that story, my brothers and sisters say to me, that was in those days, because I'm by far the oldest. In other words, That probably wouldn't happen now, but it's a lovely story, and it's how she saw life. You cannot rob me with Miss Clark sitting there.
Just wait your turn.
Rob me after.
Wouldn't it be nice, though, if that could still happen in this day and age? Right? A little bit more civility. Did he actually go and wait in the veranda?
He sort of hesitated, put the knife back in his belt or his waist, and sort of slunk off. And when she came out, he had gone. And when she told the story, she said, people have really got impossible. I'm sitting there quietly with her. She was much older than my grandmother, an elderly lady. An icon of Jamaica, and he just so rudely barges in. Was saying, but Maddie had a knife. He didn't barge in. He was robbing.
It wasn't rudeness. It was robbery.
It wasn't rudeness. It was. You said it better than I did. It wasn't rudeness.
Oh my God. I love that story. I need to embody more of your grandmother.
Read Horses in Our Hair, my book on her. My husband thinks it's my best book. But I think
really?
the best book is Slipstream, yeah. I think Drumblair is my joyous book, but I think Slipstream, for all its sorrow, it's now that I teach writing, I was at the Bunting. This is interesting, and everybody had a different discipline. It's the Radcliffe. They used to have they still have a 1 year, one academic year fellowship, but they take all different genres, all different scientists, artists thing. There were 2 writers, and there was an architect, and we used to cross genre talk, and writers would go in painters' things and paint, and they'd come and write. So I went to the architect and I said to her, could you help me with the structure of this book? And she worked with me just like she was building a building. And I followed her instructions right down every bit of the way. And it's very cleverly constructed. But I didn't do the construction, she did. So I'm being proud of her.
Well, that's great. And it's a little collaboration that your readers wouldn't probably have known.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. I can't wait to read it. You have lived and written in Canada. When did you come to Canada, Rachel?
1986.
1986. So all this time while keeping Jamaica alive and present in your work.
Mm-hmm.
When you return to Jamaica, whether in your person or in your memories, what comes to the forefront of your mind or your heart?
Drumblair, the past. I'm always completely baffled. It's like there's a graveyard where the traffic could always go any way. In fact, my grandmother, when they changed it to one way, she had to give up her license because she refused to learn to do it. She was 80. And in my mind, it's a little like that. I'm still in the old Jamaica, the old geography of it, the old sociology of it. I live in the past, and like all old people, I kind of go, oh my God, in my day. But in this case, it's total. It's like I'm back in the past. Things make me happy, like when I see lignum vitae trees or the ponciana or the things that were in my youth, and it just fills me with love and joy. But I guess the strides it has made, the changes, not that I'm not conscious of them, but I somewhat ignore them and just in my head remain where I was then.
It was a very full and rich period of your life. Do you get back to Jamaica often?
Yes, at least twice a year, because of my brothers and sisters. I love it, and I have my grandmother's cottage there that I try. There's a coffee farm, so my son keeps it going. My father's house burned down. So it's funny, I'm there in my mind, but I would never spend a night in that cottage. I would break from sadness. I'm just there in my mind, and I look up at the hills and I have my memories, and I still remember all the mountains as my grandmother named them as various gods, because she was from Cornwall. You were allowed to have a lot of gods in Cornwall, and she believed in nature and that the gods were within nature. And I kind of agree with her, but I don't dare say it because everybody thinks I'm mad. But then I have 102 teddy bears and everybody thinks I'm mad.
I like that kind of madness. I think there is the divine in nature. I'm a firm believer in that. And being in Jamaica, you're very close to that. You're very close to just the fecundity of our world.
We are incidental. Humans are incidental in Jamaica. That land is just land, nature, the power of mountains and the voice of the sea.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Do you have any wisdom as a teacher of creative writing for any aspiring or established writers in this noisy world we live in?
Wisdom, no. But if there's something that I have noticed that I think is counterproductive, is the idea that somehow you can fabricate a separateness for writing. I think it's dangerous because if you don't have the money to do it, or your life is full of a job or children or taking care of elderly, you can't separate it for a perfect circumstance. It's part of you. And I personally don't think it's any more important than the other parts of you. But that's just my feeling. I think if you make it some rarefied, special thing, which is really, I think in a way we have made artists feel good that they are special because we don't pay them enough. So we say, it's good enough, you do that painting, we'll pay nothing for it, but you're going to feel good. You're called a painter, you're going to get a review in the paper. So no, I think our work is worth something, though mine apparently, I have a different concept of it. But I think that if you try to find a separateness and you try to feel hard done by because you can't get to that room of your own, you're going to just make life very difficult and frustrating. I think fit it in. The thing always to remember, and this I would say to young upcoming writers, you're going to have all the time later on when you're my age. Your children will be gone. Your problems will probably be mostly gone. Your health will be gone. Your eyes will be gone. Oh my goodness. Everything. It's the process of emptying out. That's when you're going to have all the time you need to entertain yourself and write. So don't worry. The time will come and you will not forget these things. They're part of us. And the more you live your life when I say normal, just inclusive about it. Writing isn't exclusive. Be inclusive. The more it will be, there will be like stains in you that you can't get rid of. The knowledge and the life and the process, and it'll all come together. That would be my advice, which may not suit everybody.
It may not, but I think it's very wise advice. Your stories are integral to your existence, to your experience, and to try and separate it out.
I recently read a memoir by Hester Kaplan. She used to teach with me at Leslie. It's called Twice Born. Beautiful memoir, short book, lovely. It's about her father, who was the author of the biography that made Mark Twain famous.
Oh.
And she's related to Einstein, this girl. I mean, she has a fantastic history, very quiet person who I never got to know when I taught there. But I read her book, and it's interesting. Her book is about how her famous writing father separated himself from his family, and they were in awe of his study and whatever it was he did, and he just became a complete stranger in their midst. She, on the other hand, and she doesn't make a point of it, I just noticed it. All the time she's writing, you can feel her children at her elbow, and she lets them look at a little bit, or she reads a little bit. They're always there with her. And I thought to myself, I wonder what they will write about their mother one day. I don't know. But that's an image to remember, the one that keeps isolated. One is a man, one's a woman, but it could be the other way around.
An excellent, poignant image. If you could leave our listeners with one practice for living more truthfully and with hope, what would that be? It's a big question.
I cannot not live with hope, so I can't answer that because I think there are pessimistic people and there are optimistic people, and hope is optimism. I would wish that we all had it, but I don't think it's one of the things that you can emulate, or you either have it or you don't. Often it depends on your childhood and the way you've had to look at life. But the truthfulness, I can only talk about it in writing. If you want your work in the long run to be exactly what you want it to be, what feels right, what it should be, try always to tell the truth in it. I think the thing is not to run away from the things that are difficult to face, but to find literary ways to accommodate them, but put them in. Don't leave people out because you don't like them, but they're part of the story. Don't take shortcuts. I don't believe that an untruthful person is going to write memoir. I don't know why. I think that truth brings you to memoir. I can't speak for fiction writers because that, there's truth and then there's imagination. And a lot of what people see as untruth is actually imagination in writing. I'm just talking about in writing. Mm-hmm. But I think in memoir, if you allow yourself to be true to yourself and to feel right about your writing, you will accept the truth that has brought you to that book. And it's very interesting. I can tell when I get an early memoir what a story is really about and what it's not really about. And very often the first draft of the first few chapters is what it is not about. You remember in the old time days, we'd wear a dress. Women would wear a dress and they'd wear a slip underneath because it shouldn't be transparent. And very often this slip would show at the bottom. And I look at these early chapters and I look for the slip showing at the bottom. And when I find it, I tug and I tug and I tug and I tug. That's the story. It's the thing you want to write. You want to tell the truth, but you go in there and you write around it because you're nervous about it. The truth is frightening. Mm-hmm. So when you feel that, look for the slip at the bottom of your dress and drag it out and write about the slip, not the dress.
I love that. I will remember that. So how can my listeners find your work, follow you? When can we expect these short stories in the future?
I don't know when they'll come. I'm in a bit of a bump in my life at the moment, but when I get over that bump. But my work, I can only say it's on Amazon. All of the books are on Amazon. My latest publisher of George the Last, which is another memoir, that one is the Hillborn Group. They have all my books online as well. And can you follow me? No, I am... Oh, I'm too old to be honest with you. My niece put me on Facebook. She's the only one who has the password. She did it so I could see my grandchildren's pictures, and I've never gone on. And then she did the same thing with Instagram. So every now and again, someone will say to me, "Why won't you answer on Instagram?" And I'm like, "I'm not on." And LinkedIn,
I'm not there.
LinkedIn, I don't know who put me on. My niece swears it wasn't her. But I'm on LinkedIn, and sometimes people say, why are you so standoffish? And I'm like, I'm not there.
So definitely social media is not the way to reach you.
No.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. This has been an absolute pleasure. I have learned a lot, and I hope I will have the opportunity to speak with you again.
I hope so. Keep in touch.
I definitely will. Thank you for joining me on What's What with Heather Harris. If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow, rate, and share the show. It helps others find their way here, because the more the merrier. The future is something that we influence and imagine together. I'm Heather Harris, and until next time, stay curious and stay fiercely hopeful.